Today we finally got an update from Fat Shark about Darktide, and no, it's not a meme anymore. The next Tide next week nonsense is finally over after being trolled for so long. And if you haven't been keeping up with Darktide, basically the community managers are under an NDA right now and just kept saying next week for an update on stuff since a little bit before Christmas. So this is something that I asked for since like December 12th, where I knew the game was actually kind of falling apart, and that video took a couple days to make, but I'm sure everyone knew for a fact that this open letter needed to be released on December 1st, and this would have stopped the spiral of negative reviews pretty substantially, actually. But altogether, I guess it's better than nothing on the 11th week of the game. And yes, the 2 weeks of early access do count as launch, in my opinion. It wasn't really a beta because nothing really changed from that beta to live. So we'll read this for the first time together, and this is an open letter to our players. We take enormous pride in our ability at Fat Shark to deliver a game that millions can enjoy. This was what we set out to do with Warhammer 40k Darktide, to create a highly engaging and stable game with a level of depth that keeps you playing for weeks, not hours. Honestly, when this game actually launched, it had some crazy play hours on Steam. Like the actual time played people were putting into this was like ridiculously high. Then we fell short of meeting those expectations. I'm a little dyslexic, so it's hard to read some of this stuff sometimes. But I will say that like they definitely fell short, and this is a very weird way to start this, in my opinion, but we'll keep reading. Over the next few months, our sole focus is to address the feedback that many of you have. In particularly, we will focus on delivering a complete crafting system, a more rewarding progression loop, and continue to work on the game's stability and performance optimization. Finishing the game probably should have been a priority for the actual launch of the game. I'm just saying the crafting system could have just been launched in its original state, even if it sucked, and then gotten updated later, like any sane person would think to do. And as for stability, I mean, we've talked that one to death already. So one day a new game will come out that doesn't memory leak or spam crash, but that's probably just a different timeline from the one that we're in. So it is what it is. And I think that the progression loop of the game is just something that like is a product of everything not being finished. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. But the next part is this means we will also delay our seasonal content rollout and the Xbox Series XS launch. We will also suspend the upcoming release of premium cosmetics. We just couldn't continue down this path, knowing that we have not addressed many feedback areas in the game today. Honestly, for this part, if this came out on a console right now, it would actually just melt an Xbox. It runs so hot on PC that there's just no way a console wouldn't just explode trying to run this. I guess we'll see later this week what the hot fixes and the patch notes are, because apparently that's also coming this week. And I guess we'll just finish reading it with thank you for playing and providing feedback. We really appreciate it. It has and will continue to help shape the game we love. Martin Wallen, CEO and co-founder of Fat Shark. This isn't actually an apology. They don't even say "we sorry," which is pretty much what everybody wanted, honestly. Like, I guess they say they messed up, but like it feels so shallow. And I think overall it's just kind of corporate talk with no substance or feeling behind it, unfortunately. And I mean, it is a step in the right direction, but it's just nothing special. So I guess we'll have to wait and see if they actually follow through later this week with like with the hot fixes and the big patch or whatever that's supposed to be coming. But it really does show that they ignored the majority of the player base until the Steam reviews just got obliterated and they couldn't ignore it anymore, which is obviously deserved. But we went over that in the last two videos detailing their incompetence, and we're just not really going to repeat it again. And I know the survey was a big slap in the face to the majority of people that went through it, including myself. There was a whole thing on it where that if you answered negatively, you got all the real responses that you like probably should have been able to answer. And if you answered like overwhelmingly positive, it just like didn't really give you the options that you needed to see or should have seen. So it was very weird. And honestly, it was obviously so that the team leaders could actually see what needed to be done with the game, so they couldn't keep pushing the horrible train wreck of a direction that they had it running in. And overall, I do have to say, I still love playing this game, and I do wish them all the best on the game's recovery, as I would still like to enjoy Darktide in the future because I put so much effort into it and the community. And a lot of people asked why I was so mad in the last video, and that's really simply because when you invest a lot of time, energy, and passion into something you care about, you should probably feel something when it's falling apart. And I have a couple more big Darktide videos planned that are coming out later this week, and I will still be covering Darktide. The reason I didn't post a video for so long here actually is because I had an SSD die on me with all of my finished work and VODs for those videos, so I had to remake everything. And yes, it was an SSD, not a spinny boy. So if there's any computer experts out there, whenever it's plugged in, it just caused Windows to like infinite load, and Windows is installed on my M.2, not that SSD. So I'm pretty sure it's just broken and I need to get a new one. But if anyone can help me and has some ideas for how to get it working or get the stuff off of it, I would genuinely appreciate the help. But that's a little off topic. I would really like to actually just have an interview with Fat Shark Catfish or Akishi or both, honestly, to help restore some good faith in the community. So that way people that are really passionate about the game or people that want to come back that are just waiting for some news can get the answers they want and probably deserve. But I also know that I'm labeled as one of the non-shills for Darktide and probably one of the people that they don't want to talk to. So it probably won't happen because there's two factions that play Fat Shark games. There's the people that are really passionate and actually love the games and just get mad when their new hobby / favorite game isn't finished or just not working good because we want it to grow and thrive. And then there's the people that would rather see it have a couple thousand players and just kind of stagnate and just kind of do what happened to Vermintide for a long time. But the reality is everybody who's played Darktide actually just loves the gameplay, the shooting, like everybody loves that, but it's not enough depth to keep people around. And very clearly there's problems that needed to be addressed that got ignored because of the small amount of positive feedback that got cherry-picked. A really good example is the private lobbies with bots that don't work. It doesn't make sense to have like the private games when you have bots that can't function in them. And there was a lot of people that said crashing wasn't a problem when it very clearly was for the majority of people. So it got ignored for the entirety of early access and was only like kind of okay the second week of the game, but is still a problem for quite a few people. So a lot of us have a reason not to be satisfied with Darktide. And just because some people want to overlook the problems doesn't make them not exist or people less mad about them. It just makes you look toxic for trying to disregard other people, which you should just never do in general. And just because you can close your eyes and pretend things are okay doesn't mean that they are. And that's basically how we got here, is those things got cherry-picked by leadership that just didn't want to read any negativity about the game because they just thought it wasn't a real problem. So it really is a good thing that that survey got rushed out the way that it did so that proper changes could be made, because very clearly they had other plans for the game and it had to completely change directions for what the majority of us thought would be obvious, but for them wasn't. And this is the case of, I think that team leaders and game directors actually should be forced to play their own game for a couple hours a day to just completely avoid situations like this. Because you have to think, if you're actually like actively playing the game, you would very clearly see a lot of those things need to be fixed. And any game that does do this and has passionate people working on it actually ends up doing insanely well. Like great examples are like Deep Rock Galactic, Dwarf Fortress, and oddly enough, Stardew Valley. They're all made by a handful of people or even just solo. And they're just people who wanted their favorite game and made it themselves and made something amazing. And they only keep getting better by listening to the majority of people's feedbacks about problems and things that should be added. So hopefully we see this happen with Darktide. And it's a shame we have to wait even longer for something, but I'll keep covering the game. And I do have some Hogwarts Legacy stuff planned, so hopefully you guys enjoy that too, because when it comes around that time that it fizzles out, hopefully Darktide's finished and we can all enjoy the game that we really wanted. So I hope you all have a good night, and I'll see you again soon, either here or on the live stream.